Welcome everyone to this Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host Tom Dillon. This has been recorded live at our Tim Pot mobile studio and broadcast around the world. Um, Today we're joined by a special guest, Sarah Flynn, who's going to speak to us about the 4P's of serviced accommodation. Planning, I'm going to guess them. I don't know. Planning, photography. We'll see how many I get before before Sarah reveals. At home, jot, or put them in the comments here. Jot the 4P's down that you think, and we'll see how many we can get right between us. Um, Before we start, I'd just like to say by way of a disclaimer that today's a wonderful discussion, but nothing said here constitutes financial advice. You should always take professional advice before investing your hard-earned cash. There may be the odd unplanned swear word along the way as well. The format for today is that we're just going to have a conversation, but in betwixt and between the conversation, we'll try and weave in some stuff about service accommodation, because Sarah, amongst other things, is a bit of an expert on that subject. Um, with regard to Sarah, speaking of Sarah, she is the founder and director of KAF, KAF Properties, a short-term let service accommodation management company which currently operates in the UK and in Spain. KAF Properties has been managing, I don't know why I'm leaning into that like it's a weird name, it's perfectly normal. KAF Properties has been managing properties for 4 years, providing a fully managed service and a completely hands-off process to clients. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me, Tom.
Thanks for coming on. So, getting straight into it, I've heard, and I'm a man with no serviced accommodation myself, but who knows? I'm tempted. Let's do it. But is what I have heard is that serviced accommodation maybe has taken the place of HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, over the last 5 to 7 years as sexy property thing that people do and make money on really quickly. So is that true? Do you spend a lot of time counting gold coins, or is it not that simple?
Oh, all the time, Tom. I'm just getting the bags out, the loot's coming in. I can't keep up with it. No, of course not. Um, I think there is an ideology of that in the market at the minute. And I think that's because there is the potential, and I use that word particularly, to make very good money. And I think they are or can be the old school HMO days of like 10, 15 years ago when
Mm.
HMOs were coming about and they were just getting a bit of traction and the people that were doing them very well and they were all new and fun and interesting. And so I think the exploration of SA is definitely on the same trajectory. But I think there's a lot of things and a lot of moving parts that are involved in making SA work. And I've definitely seen all sides of it, and you can make essay work very, very, very well. And you can have, the good days of the gold coming in. But I think to do that, there are lots of components that are arguably even more complicated than HMOs to be able to make that work. And I think the one thing that people don't really get about SA is it is a full-time job. And that's one of the things that I think people forget. So lots of people are in the right ballpark of SA. They sort of maybe loosely understand how it might work and what they should be doing. And then they try to do it and it falls flat on its face. And that's because there are lots of little nuances within it, really, that you have to get right and you have to be watching all the time to make that work. And that's how I suppose a lot of my clients and most of my clients over the years I've picked up by word of mouth, um,
Mm.
really end up coming to me just because it is such a beast to manage. And to get it right, once it's right, it's great. And then you do get on the hamster wheel of, oh, okay, this is working, and I can see the monthly income increasing, and you get into a nice rhythm. But to get to that place can be extraordinarily difficult. And I think that's the piece that people don't really see. It's like anything in property, isn't it, Tom? There's all the good old sharks of the property world that are out there selling the courses that you can put a property on booking.com or Airbnb, and tomorrow morning you're going to get a £20,000 booking from a contractor and you can sit back and relax for a year. Um, and, whilst that is possible, to get to that place involves a level of work that is absolutely unfounded. And I think that's the point that people don't really get.
Sure, that's a shame because I've got I got a course which where people can get no I haven't um I should have asked this question first. We're already straight out of order and it's completely my fault. But just for people who are tuning in and haven't got the first idea what service accommodation open brackets SA, close brackets means? I could explain it, but why don't you explain it, given you're better at it than me?
Serviced accommodation is this idea of short-term lettings. So there's lots of different terminologies for them. The professional term probably is serviced accommodation, but it's this idea of you running your own mini hotel, I suppose, on a small scale. So whether that would be an apartment, it might be a full apartment block, it could be a chalet at the East Yorkshire coast, it could be a lodge in the Dales, whatever that might be. It's a bit like either a second home, some people might call it a holiday home. There's lots of different terminologies, but it's this idea that you are basically letting a property out on a short-term basis. So it might be 3 days, 4 days, long weekend breaks, whatever that might look like. And every property is unique, which we can come to talk about in terms of, how it might operate. But generally speaking, the whole premise is you are providing a fully managed service. So you're letting the guest, sorry, go in. They will obviously stay. Everything would be pre-prepared for them before they arrive. So the cleaners would have been in. They would have done a full turnaround service. So they'd be changing all the bed linen, washing, changing, drying it, getting everything prepared, full clean of the property, maybe putting some welcome packs in. Sometimes you find people will do like teas, coffees, sugars, all that sort of good stuff. Depends how crazy you want to be and how far you want to take it. But it's this idea of basically letting on a short-term basis, I think.
No, fair enough. For any hosts out there listening, definitely put biscuits in. Huge fan of just a couple of biscuits when you're always sad. Just the ones you put like a ginger nut out or a bourbon. That's like 4 pence for the host, and I guess an extra point 0.2, 0.3 stars from me straight out of the gate. Um, uh, you mentioned there were lots of moving parts, lots of things. There are in lots of property strategies, but I think it's especially true for SA. And I've got this funny feeling that at least four of them might start with P. Uh, just to call me
Maybe.
lucky. Why don't you, without wanting to lead the witness here, why don't you tell us about at least three or maybe even four of the P's that you think are crucial for getting this right for anyone interested
Yes.
in doing this for themselves?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is, there are many, many moving parts in it, like we've just said, and there are lots of different nuances. And it's sometimes the minute things that you need to change to be able to have a really big impact on profit. But I think on a more general basis, to really get going, there are kind of four key elements that I think are absolutely necessary to ensure a level of success. That you can be really confident once your property goes to market that, okay, there might be some things I need to chop and change on the way, but basically, I've got what I would call the 4 key P's right. And so I think there's an order of them as well. So you did guess one of them, which is photography, but that's the last one. So we'll come on to that last. But the first one for me would be what I call prime location, which sounds really straightforward. And it's probably, it sort of does what it says on the tin, but I will go into a bit of detail in a second. But more broadly speaking, prime location, or this idea of a prime location, has been around since the beginning of property, right? So when you're looking for a property, how do you know it's in the right location? What are the elements that you're looking for to make sure that property is going to work and it's going to perform for you? And SA is absolutely no different to that. And I think, it's about so what's your target audience? What are you looking for? So are you going to go for a city centre property? Are you going to go for countryside property? Are you looking for somewhere in the coastal region? What is the target market? What's the niche that you're going to be looking for? What is the draw that is going to bring people to that property? And you do have to really make sure that you're getting that right. So it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm going to go buy a property in Leeds, for example, because I know there'll be loads of contractors there and it's the second most popular growing city in England at the moment, for example. That's great, but whereabouts in Leeds are you going to do? Because I think there'd be an assumption that people would think, for example, well, I'll go get an apartment right in the centre. That's really convenient. People can walk to, if you're going to attract tradespeople, for example, people can walk to the building site. That's exactly where I need to be. Whereas actually, in reality, most contractors don't like staying in the city centre. So they like to be a bit further out. And they like to stay in houses generally because they all like to stop together. They like the sort of camaraderie of being, as a unit. If they're going to be working away for long periods of time, they want to sit with the other lads. They want it to be homely. They want to come home and be able to cook. They don't want to eat out every night. They might want to nip to the local pub. Well, that's quite difficult if you're in a city centre because you're normally surrounded like bistros and boutique shops, etc. So it's very easy to just look at something on the outset and think you know about it. But I think without doing the research and trying to understand exactly what the target audience want or the demographic that you're going after, it's very easy to be misled and end up buying something that actually could be completely wrong. So I think understanding the prime location is key. And that can be driven by a lot of research and also sometimes just picking up the phone and speaking to some of the people in the areas. And I think that some of those things are like really old school things to do that people have banged the drum about time and time again. But the amount of time that I've rung building sites and contractor companies, and I said, like, have you got any guys? Where are they looking for? Like, what's the type of property they'd want to stay in? How long are the stays on average? Like, stuff like that's just so it's what I would call easy to do, easy not to do, right? It's really easy to do, but it's also really easy if people just go, I'm not going to bother with that, you know. And I think they're just little things like that that make the difference. But you have to understand, like if you're looking at the Yorkshire Dales and that's what you decide you want to target, fine. But where is it? Where is it that's really up and coming? Because you might also find, for example, I don't know, Malham's like a really popular area. I would argue that if you did a bit of research, it would probably show that it's a bit oversaturated. So, without doing that research, you might be going and buying a property in an area that you think in your mind, could be really lucrative. But actually, if it's not backed up by actual stats and evidence, um, and doing a bit of key research, there might be another really key up and coming place where there's loads of walks and it's just suddenly trending at the minute, and it's going to become hot soon. And it might be a fact that you can get in there and get yourself a nice little lodge for £20,000 and it makes you 40 grand a year, and that might be the key, is it close to the start of the walks? Are the local amenities? Can people get to the shops, and all these things have to be right. So the location for me is key. You need to be kind of understanding what the target audience is you're looking at. What do you want to niche in? I think, having a bit of a niche is good in any property. Um, and then really understanding that to make sure that you are buying in the right location.
You mentioned picking up the phone, speaking to whatever it might be,
Mm.
construction sites or nail bars or whatever it is what you think your guests might be interested in, sort of working at or whatever. What other bits of research can people do, or is that a trade secret? Because
No,
it
no,
can't just
no.
be picking up the phone, can it?
No, no, not at all. I think there are lots of other, so some of the things that we generally do, if I was looking to take on a new property, I would be trying to understand who the key audience is. So like I say, one of the tasks could be like if I thought it was a contractor area, and that was kind of one example. So if I thought it was a contractor area, I might like start trying to ring trades, ring local building contractors, etc., and understanding the market. If, for
Sure.
example, I thought it was going to be more of a holiday destination, so like a coastal resort, for example, um, I would probably look in on Airbnb and Booking.com and trying to understand how many other properties are on, so what's the competition like? As an example, so we've got a lot of properties that we manage that are on the East Yorkshire coast. A lot of them are in and around Scarborough, but they're not in Scarborough. So they'll be like on the outskirts of Scarborough, them in Caton Bay, maybe a bit further down in Filey, etc. We don't actually manage anything in Scarborough. And I would be very cautious to manage anything in Scarborough. Because I wouldn't be confident that we could fill that property unless it was really top spec, high end, a bit unique. You were going to target a very specific market. The reason I say that is if you look on Booking.com, there are about 20,000 properties that you can choose from on in Scarborough. So you have to really ask yourself, why are you going to be booked against the rest of the competition? So that's just like a simple win that, and I'd do the same on Airbnb. I'd be looking on, any of the major sites, like what's the competition? If there's just reams and reams and reams and reams of properties that look like the one that you might be taking on, why on earth would somebody choose you? And you might be flogging a dead horse before you've even started, from that point of view. So I think that's another thing. A big thing that we do from like a software point of view is we use AirDNA. I absolutely love AirDNA. For anybody that doesn't know what that is, and there's loads of other things you can use, but I just personally like AirDNA. It's like a back office piece of software that takes raw data from things like Airbnb, etc., and it pulls in all that raw data and enables you to kind of conduct really in-depth research about regions, different areas in the UK, well, all over the world, actually. It does do it globally as well, so you can look at literally anything. But from that, you can then look at like what's the average occupancy rate in the area. Is it a trending area? It will tell you if demand has been rising, and what percentage it's been rising by over maybe a 12-month period. So you can see, in some cases you might see that there's actually been a decline in demand. So, okay, maybe this is not a great area at the minute. There's been a 40% decline in bookings, for example. Equally, we've taken a couple of properties on recently in Haworth, and the growth rate at the minute there is like 86%. So you can see that probably the likelihood is that they're going to sell really well because people are actively looking in that area. So AirDNA for me is a great tool. It provides just everything you could possibly need. It will tell you the kind of the price per night in the area, what's the competitive price. You can even click in and look physically at other properties in the area and how they look and feel, what's going well. It'll tell you the individual occupancy of each one. So there might be a particular property that you look at and it's only got 30% occupancy for the year, but the next one's got 100%. So you're able to actually look into those two properties and think, okay, well, why is that one selling and why is that one not selling? And, do I need to do something differently to attract the right kind of client, and this is all about making sure it's in the right area. And I mean, AirDNA actually is a recurrent theme throughout everything we do, which I'll kind of come on to, because it is a one-stop shop for me. I find it does literally tell you nearly everything you could possibly imagine about a property. And it also really kindly comes with a hefty price tag, of course. But it really does, it is the bee's knees in terms of kind of software, I feel, to be able to adequately understand if a property is going to perform in that area or not.
Fair enough. So, what's that presumably brings us nicely to our second P, whatever that might
It
be.
absolutely does. So the next thing is property type, but the two really are linked. So once you're kind of confident that you're in the right location, that you've got the right level of demand, etc., then really you want to be looking for the type of property that sells and what's going to be really bookable. And again, a software like AirDNA will absolutely help you along this road. So it will tell you a breakdown of how many different types of property are in the area. So it might say, for example, at the minute, across all platforms, there are 500 properties being offered in this area. Of those 500 properties, 3 are 6-bed properties, 400 are 3-bed properties, and there's like maybe 100 flats, or whatever that breakdown might be. So you imminently know that probably a 3-bed property is what's going well. If all those other people are doing that, and you can see that the average occupancy over the year for the region, for example, is like 80%, you know that those properties are getting booked. So that type of property, that 3-bed property, is the type of property that is getting booked. And so you need to be making sure that you are finding the right type of property. And it might be because, for example, and it could be anything. So it could be like in that specific location, for example, it's really popular with families, and so you've got like the parents' bedroom and then there's 2 other bedrooms so that the children can have one each, for example. And it might be that that is just what sells really well in that area. Equally, it might be that apartments go really well in the area. It might be just couples that are staying and they just want, they're quite happy with an apartment, they're not bothered about a garden. But you need to understand what sort of property type sells well. And again, just trawling through some of the sites as well, the Airbnbs and hotels, Expedia, etc., just seeing what other people are selling, which ones are booked up, which ones aren't booked up. That very quickly helps you assess the type of property that you think will do well in the area.
So, can you? I've sort of glanced at our DNA, but
Mhm.
never really burrowed into it, and that might be true of some of the people who are watching and listening, not experts on it. So, can I pick up, say, a postcode or an area? Say, pick a postcode M1. That's the middle of Manchester or wherever it might be, and
Yeah.
go right. M1. What can I segment it down to say? houses, flats, two bed, three bed, four bed,
Yes,
whatever, and then also see the occupancy rate for each one of those. So I could say,
that
hang
is
on a minute,
exactly right.
do that. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can say 20% for everything except 90% for one bed flats. I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
one bed flat might be the thing to get.
Yeah, and that is exactly right. That is exactly right. So you can filter that out by each individual property type, right down to is it shared? Some people still, we don't particularly, but some people do still really heavily get involved in like shared like kind of shared housing on an SA basis, which is very, very niche. And like I say, we don't personally do anything like that, but other people do, so a bit like a HMO, but you would just sort of rent the SA by room and then they would still share the kitchen. That sort of model works really well in like contractor areas sometimes if there's lots of guys from different trades, but they're all working on the same site. They're quite happy to kind of still share some amenities, but just have their own bedroom on an evening. And so it will tell you all those different things, like is it flats that are going well? Is it like apart hotels that are selling what, all the different models and types of property and everything in between, really. And that's one of the reasons that I love it so much, because as I say, it really does act as a one-stop shop to be able to understand absolutely everything about that area. And the filtering system, because it's so specific, really helps you to get a really good, like deep understanding, I suppose, from that point of view.
Okay. Okay. I can't wait any longer. What's the third one?
Is the suspense killing you, Tom? Is that what it is? Um,
That's
the fourth one is pricing. And I think you should have got that, Tom, when you were guessing.
Funnily enough, I got location, but I was thinking that's an L.
You see, I went in for the P, didn't I? Prime
Uh,
location.
so I sort of missed that. But yeah, what an idiot for not working out that the money's kind of critical to this.
No, no, it's fine. So yeah, so pricing is obviously absolutely key. I think when you're looking at is this property going to work or not, without a doubt. And this is all about being competitive, maximizing occupancy, and ultimately driving income and profit. And I think if you get this piece wrong, it can go very quickly, very fast. And that's where the shiny pennies and the loot suddenly start fading away into the background if you don't understand this piece. So I think, once you've decided where you're going to buy it, you've decided what the type of properties that are going to work. The next thing is, okay, is it going to work in reality? Like, how do we know from a pricing point of view, A, how we're going to price it, and B, once we've agreed the pricing, once we kind of work that out over the average occupancy of the year, take off and deduct all the costs that come out of SA, of which there are a lot, then reality, what are we going to be left with? Is it actually going to be a fully functional property and am I going to make some money from it? So again, some of the ways that you would do that would, again, through things like AirDNA, you can have a look at what the average price per night is, and just get an idea of what's going in there. And you will know if you've chosen the property. So if it's like two-bed properties that go really well, you will be able to filter that down to see, okay, what's been the average price per night for the last 12 months, 6 months, for two-bed properties, for example, and that will give you a general idea of the price. It will also show you a graph of how that price has kind of undulated over time. So, where have the peaks, where the troughs been, what's been the lowest price, what's been the highest price, to give you a really good idea of how the market is performing on a month by month basis as well. And then you've obviously got to couple that up with what is the average occupancy in the area, because it's great saying, oh, well, it performs at £150 a night. Well, that's great, but if the occupancy is 40%, it's kind of irrelevant. From my point of view, you have to be getting occupancy of 70% and above on anything to make it worth your while. I think otherwise, really, it's a struggle. Unless you had a really, really special property that only lets for the 6-week holidays, but it's a 10-bed mansion and it lets at £3 a night. Well, that's a different story. But for most people, if you've got an average property in a good area and it's going to do all right, you have to be achieving 70 to 75% occupancy to really make it work, I think.
I
Um,
remember uh, I remember someone telling me once, like, any idiot can get a property to rent in high season, and more or less it's really difficult to get to rent that much in low season. You'll get some
Mhm.
rents, but not that much. So what really matters is the shoulder season, which
Yeah.
is, either end of the high season. That's where the successful properties are successful, and the less successful properties in service accommodation terms anyway are less successful. Is that fair? Maybe an oversimplification, but maybe fair.
No, no, no. I think that is absolutely fair. So a lot of the things that we see is clients will come to me and they'll go, I've tried to manage it myself, Sarah. I can book it all of August. And I'll go, okay. And they'll go, but then that's it. And it's like, and that is very, very, very true, Tom. Any idiot can get a property booked pretty much in England in August. You would really have to be blindfolded, tied to a chair, and not able to move to stop that process. So, and that's just because they're very glaringly obvious, as we all know, it's school holidays, and so everybody goes away, generally speaking. And so that's not really the battle. You could, like you say, you could do that blindfolded. It wouldn't particularly be hard work and it would probably go regardless. I think the challenge is, like you say, the shoulder seasons and everything in between, really. I think, and it does depend where the property is for sure. So like probably 50% of our managed portfolio is on the coast or on coastlines in the UK. And so they are definitely seasonal properties. And you have to work really, really hard to get them booked between like March to maybe May. And then equally, really, really hard again from September to October, end of October, really. And then after that, you might see a bit of a peak at Christmas. You do get people that still, don't mind the winter and they want to come away over the Christmas or New Year period. But outside of that, you just have to be prepared that that necessarily isn't going to be full, in those seasons. And that's why we're at the kind of 70-75% occupancy, because that's just the nature of the market, so there is an element of that. And you do have to put the work in to get it right. And so I think once you've got this idea of, okay, what's the average price? And again, you can look at other people's properties for that as well. Like, what are other people charging? Because you've got to be competitive and be realistic. Then what we do is then we use an AI dynamic pricing system. So we actually use Price Labs, but there's loads of different ones out there. I really like Price Labs because it integrates with our channel manager software that we have, which is like a back office system where you can put all your advert and then it basically distributes the advert and it uses it as a one-stop shop for absolutely everything. You can manage all your bookings and things from it. And Price Labs fully integrates with our channel manager system that we use. But the reason why I like dynamic pricing particularly, and a lot of people do dynamic pricing now, but it is necessary, is because you have to stay in line with the competition. And if you're not using AI dynamic pricing, and this is probably one of the key areas where AI really comes into SA, if you're not using AI dynamic pricing, from my experience, it does result in a loss of bookings because you're not automatically in line with the competition. So for those people who don't know what dynamic pricing is, what we would do is we would be looking on AirDNA and other properties, and we would decide, okay, what is the average price in the area and what's competitive for the type of property, etc. And then we would be coming up with what I would call 3 price points for the property. So we'd have a low price point. So what's the bottom that we're going to charge? It's November, it's cold, it's rainy. We know it's at the coast, for example. Nobody really wants to go. How are we going to drive people in? And that might be £80 a night. And we have to make sure that that's a realistic balance because we still have to be making money for the property. So you can't say, oh, I'll give it for 20 quid because that's not going to work either because you'd just be operating at a loss. So there has to be an element of realism. So you have to be working out at what point are we just going to say no, and it's actually better for it not to be booked. And sometimes that is the answer, like to make money. Sometimes it's better not to be booked at those points because you're keeping the money that you've already made. Whereas if you start selling it too cheap, you end up operating at a loss, and that's equally not good for business either. So let's say £80 is the lowest price point. let's say that the average nightly rate in the area is £110, so that would be the middle price point. And then we'd have like a top end maximum price point, which would be like your peak season. So any school holidays, any bank holidays, things like that. And that might be £135 a night for argument's sake. So then you would put those three price points into the AI dynamic pricing software. And what that would do is it automatically on your behalf watches the market. So it's assessing demand against other properties all the time. It's assessing demand in the area. Are there things coming up? So for example, let's say there's an arena close by and Rod Stewart's doing a comeback tour and everybody's going to book. The system automatically knows that. And so it drives the price up naturally. It might not drive it up to £135 a night because you're never going to get as much demand as in a school holiday, but it might drive it to £123 a night, for example. But it's automatically driving that demand up where is needed to be able to maximize profit. And then on the flip side, when it's quiet, it's driving the price down. And this is all about being competitive because nobody can physically do that. Not even though this is my full-time job, I can't sit watching all the properties that I manage going, right, quickly, this one looks like it's going to go down a bit. Let me change the price. It would be absolutely insane. And so you have to use technology in this business, I think, to be able to combat those things, to be able to be competitive and to be able to make sure that you are in line with the rest of your competition and you are bookable all the time.
Friend of mine had a two-bedroom terraced house up near the Manchester City Stadium, and it's an okay area, but not the best, but fine. And people used to go
Mm.
there, and it's, as far as I know, he's still got it, and using it as a service accommodation unit. And people would go there and often like go and shopping in Manchester, whatever they were doing, have a weekend. And so, because he was right very close to Man City Stadium, the kind of range or the high, medium, and low price for him was crazy. Where it might be maybe £80, £100 a night, the low point, maybe 120, 130 be the midpoint. But the high point would be whenever Man City played a big game, a European fixture, a Manchester derby, something like that. They play Arsenal, Chelsea. And for those weekends, especially if it was a Saturday or Sunday game, but anyway, whatever day it was, it could go up to like 400 or 500 quid a night. Because people would pay it because there's nothing else, everything's booked.
Yeah.
That would be his rate. I never really chatted to him whether I hope he was using some sort of AI or some sort of
Mm.
dynamic pricing then and now. But can AI deal with that? You just simply put a higher number and
Yeah.
it deals with that.
Yeah, so you can set lots of things up on Price Labs that is like very, very clever piece of technology, to be fair. And so you can change it to say like if you can see demands really like really, really high,
Yeah,
just see what people will
still
pay.
nuts.
um and we've tried that with a couple of kind of our top end properties, and it is really interesting, so we've had properties before that I kind of thought the tap out price was maybe like 180, and we've left it and it's gone to like 250. And that's because the demand is so high suddenly for whatever that, like you say, and the Man U thing is just that really is a perfect example of that. If you've got something that is every so often just near like a stadium or something that really drives excessive demand at periods, then you've got to cash in on those points, right? And so you need to be prepared for that. I think the other thing about Price Labs, which is very clever, is you can set it to fill what they call orphan days. So orphan days would be like, let's say that you decide, and this would be another thing through research that you would have already understood, that the minimum nights that you're going to offer is 3 nights, because let's say that the research tells you that the average stay is 3.4 days, which generally is actually the average for the whole of the UK, no matter where you look, sometimes a bit more, but generally. So you're going to do an average of you're going to do a minimum of 3 night stays any night of the week they can book in, but it would be for a minimum of 3 nights. And then what might happen is you have somebody book Monday to Thursday, and then you have somebody else book Saturday to Tuesday. So then you have what they call 2 orphan days, which normally, if you just kept the minimum of 3 nights, nobody would be able to book that. It wouldn't even show as bookable because it's not 3 nights. But Price Labs, as an example, or any AI dynamic software generally should be able to do this. You can set it to try and fill orphan days. So it will automatically change and it'll be like, oh, there's 2 nights here. So let's sell the 2 nights for a bit more money. So we're still, make sure that we're still making the money. But somebody might only want 2 nights. And so this is all about you, like I say, use of the technology to maximize the profit from that point of view.
Black and white is the way I like to do photography. Is that taking off yet in SA, or is people still on colour? A little bit of black and white.
Definitely colour, Tom. Definitely colour. And hilariously, it's funny you say that because just as a bit of an aside, we have definitely found at the minute that there is an absolute trend of properties with colour. People love the colour.
Mm.
Sometimes the wackier the better. People are really involved in this idea of like a bright pink wall at one side, and and it's very strange. I don't know, like anything in property, they're just trends out there. But at the minute, it does seem to be a bit of a sell in the SA market. And I think when you think about that, it does link to the photos. So my whole piece about photography in SA is it's got to be right. It does have to be right. So um it's like you can get professional pictures done if you want. Or you can go down another route, which I do, which is just using an iPhone. And people think I'm a bit nuts because they're like, Sarah, you're not going to pay someone for professional photography. And I did for a long time pay people for professional photography. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, my challenge was I was getting these pictures back and they were great, but they just looked a bit boring. It was like
Mm.
very samey, and I felt like I was looking at an estate agency. And I just thought that's not really what I'm trying to sell. And so I took it upon myself to understand a little bit about iPhone and the actual technology behind iPhone and how the camera works and all the different editing tools and what you could do to make things look vibrant. And I actually found that I was just going to do my own pictures and see how that went. And I have honestly never looked back. And I think if you are confident enough and you have got a bit of time to just understand a little bit about how like your camera works on your phone, I have an iPhone, but most cameras these days on any phone really, is almost equivalent from a kind of a professional and a pixelated point of view. They do look as good as like real paid professional cameras. And so really, what's the difference? And the reason why I liked it, because I felt like suddenly I could kind of take control of how that property would look and feel and put my own stamp on it when I was taking the pictures, rather than relying on other people. Um, but again, I think if you want to do professional pictures, also fine. I think maybe just give the photographer a little bit of direction. But what we started to do, and I've kind of collected this now over the years, and people laugh at me, I turn up at the property. And if you were going to have a secret fifth P, Tom, it would be props. So I turn up at the property with like a suitcase full of props, which people think I'm absolutely nuts. And I'll come in and the client will go, why have you brought a suitcase with you? And I'm like, just hold fire. This is important, it's important. And people do love colour. It's a really attractive thing what makes you stand out. So in a lot of instances, what you'll find is when you're going to advertise on the likes of Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, etc., wherever that is, even on Facebook, most of the time you get an opportunity to you'll be putting lots of pictures up, but when people are looking, there'll be literally one thumbnail picture. So if you think about it, you're getting literally one opportunity, like one chance for somebody to stop and go, oh, okay, this is interesting. Let me click into it. And that's what you're trying to achieve. Because once they're in that property on the advertising page, they'll then look at the other pictures, they're then reading about it, you're then getting them enticed, embroiled in it. And it's, I suppose, it's a little bit like when people talk about that you've got a website and how are you increasing clicks and optimizing SEO and all that good stuff. And it's very similar to that. It's like you've got to use that one picture. You have to choose. Even if you've taken 20 great pictures, you then still have to and I do look rigorously at the pictures and I agonize over them, and people think I'm nuts, but I think that's you've got that one chance to make it stand out. And so how is that property going to look different? Um and so you have to get that one picture right. People love bedroom pictures. love a close-up bedroom picture. A lot of our properties, like I'll spend time like silly stuff I've hidden in wardrobes and taken pictures, of like particular angles and things that I just think look inviting or the cell well. And this is really about getting creative. It probably works well for me because I've got a very creative brain anyway, but it is about getting creative. So I'll turn up with my props and I'll have like fake trees and I've got bottles of wine and, almost stale croissants that probably need replacing. But it's about getting those things out, creating color, creating vibrancy, and getting people to imagine themselves in the property. So you have to be able to feel like you're in that property. So I do a lot of what I call lifestyle pictures. And to me, what that is would be like a bit of a close-up maybe of the dining room table with some wine poured, maybe some like crisps to share that are out or, and it is about imagining yourself in that situation. People want to look at it and they want to feel like they are already in that property. And so it is about being a bit creative, lots of color, lots of vibrancy, lots of different angles. Sometimes I'll take pictures from like the back of a chair, looking at another chair, maybe on a decking area. So it feels like the consumer is sat in the chair, like looking out. And they're all silly little things, but they're just things that I think people can relate to and they can imagine themselves in the property. And they're
Marginal
the
gains,
sort
isn't
of things, yeah, and they're the sort of things that set you apart from the competition. And that's why I say that photography is key because I think it's very easy to just scroll down one thing after another and think, oh, these all look the same. I've seen this apartment 120 times already, and so it's like, what's the uniqueness of that particular property? What's different about it? What does it bring? What is that thing that you will instantly look at it in that one picture and think, oh, that would sell. And you tend to find that in every property, and it is true for me in every property I've ever been in, there will be one element of the property that you instantly look at and you just think, oh, that's the one. Like that's the room that's good. For whatever reason, it might just have a particularly luxurious sofa or a great lamp next to, but you can just very quickly get a feel for, oh, that's the money shot there. Like and anybody that's in property, I think, with a little bit of creativity about them would very quickly be able to see, oh, that looks like that's the most inviting section of this house. So we're gonna like focus in on that, I guess.
I think we should test this theory out because normally when we do launch these on YouTube, the thumbnail is like me and you sat here like this. So we should test this out by instead you can send me, you can pick any picture you want,
Fine.
obviously with the agreement of whoever your client, and
Yeah.
then put that as the thumbnail, and we'll see if it does any better than the
I
rest of
love
them.
it. I think we should do that as a challenge. I'm up for that,
Yeah,
Tom.
yeah.
Yeah, without a
I'm
doubt.
up for that, and I get to see a great picture, which is rather than
Yeah.
my own mug, which is definitely a step forward. I'll make sure we get that. And if anyone watching on YouTube, hello, hope you enjoyed the thumbnail. Uh, a couple of quick ones, and then we'll wrap up. Lending or providing money. If we stick with the key theme here, um, I imagine there's two main ways to get lending, and this is for anyone who's thinking, Sarah's sold this to me. I'm up for this now. I've checked my DNA. This I've got a house or a flat, or whatever it might be, and this looks like it's going to make me a fortune. So I'm up for doing some SA. My guess is there's two ways. One is sort out some proper serviced accommodation lending, if you indeed have any lending on your property at all. Or two is to have some normal regular buy to let lending and hope they don't notice. Would those be the two main strategies that people are using?
I mean, unfortunately, yes, they are the two main strategies I think that people are using. I think
So
you do see that, whenever I take on clients, we have a duty of care to make sure that things have been done like legally and responsibly. And so if we have people that have already got buy to lets, I would say, well, you need to be calling your mortgage provider and understanding like what are the rules and regulations? Do you need to get a different one? And I
sure.
know that you and I, Tom, have kind of spoke on WhatsApp about this idea that people do and providers do now specific SA mortgages, and that is a thing because the lenders understand that that's kind of what's going on in the market. The market's changing. There is this upcoming like SA market that's really great, gaining traction. So they need to be a part of it, of course, and they need to provide a service to make sure that people can do that legally and responsibly, right? So I think that you have to make sure that you do that you're absolutely doing that. Um, and that's really, really important. I think one of the things that I do just want to mention actually, and I think it's it's quite a big topic and it's possibly not for now, but I think I did just want to mention it was, and it does sort of link into the lending idea, this idea of rent to SA. And I think this is really, it's really interesting. And I think, and this is definitely not financial advice, but in my experience, I do think it's quite high risk. And I think for anybody that's thinking about doing it, I think, and I'm quite happy for people to reach out and have a chat to me about this, by the way. But I think just in my experience, I think just maybe tread carefully because it does link into the lending. I think it's quite high risk, and not lots of people understand the risk involved in rent to SA. So this is like rent for people that listen. This is like rent to rent, where people would traditionally have gone to a landlord that's a bit tired, a bit fed up. They're not making much money off the buy to let, and then they'd go, "Oh, let me take it off your hands for a year. We'll guarantee the rent for a year, and we'll change it into a HMO." So lots of people now have taken that one step further, and they've gone, "Oh, that's not making any money. Let's do rent to SA." But I think you have to remember that a lot of these landlords have still got lending. So even if you can change it into an SA mortgage, a lot of them still won't let you then sublet it to somebody else, and that could cause a lot of hot water for people. So I think that's just something to be really, really mindful of. Um, I think if you've got somebody that owns the property outright, that's different because obviously it's a totally different ball game then. But I still think it's quite high risk in terms of guaranteeing rent on an SA because there are not very many guarantees. These people are signing for 3 nights, not 10 months, in a lot of cases. So I think that that's just something to kind of be mindful of, and something I did just want to mention because it is something that I do feel quite strongly about in terms of I would never want to see people really get into hot water, whether that be legally or financially. I think from that point of view, there's a big sell on it, and I see it a lot. Kind of full circle to what we were sort of touched on the start when I was talking about property sharks. There are a lot out there, and there are lots of people selling this idea. And some people have made rent to SA work really well, make no mistake. But I think there are a lot of logistical challenges and kind of legalities involved in it. And I think you just need to tread like very carefully from that point of view. So definitely get an
Yeah,
SA mortgage without a
yeah.
doubt.
Mm. I've had friends who've been burned by that. If leaseholders turning up with it's in a block of flats, then the freeholder might well take an
Yeah.
interest in what's happening in flat 48, especially if there's any sort of noise, and it's of course impossible to
Mhm.
to keep that noise down when it's not your noise, when it's one of your guests. And that happens a few times. Suddenly people start complaining. People will see people coming and going with bags. So yeah,
Mhm.
it can get interesting quickly. The sixth P, crikey, we've over delivered here. And my sort of final question here is around planning. Which again, because SA is quite new, I think an interesting thing, and something I'm a bit ignorant about, hopefully about to become less ignorant, which is my understanding it's a bit of an interesting topic in terms of whether you need planning for SA seems to vary by area. Is that roughly it?
Yeah, it is. And so I think, again, this kind of goes back to what we were saying at the start. SA is like old school HMOs at the minute.
Mm.
It's a bit of a free for all. The government know it's a bit of a free for all. There's lots of wild and wonderful things going on, lots of legal and illegal things going on. And so they're trying to find ways to try and manage and control that situation. And so some of the ways that they're starting to do that, and this is bespoke by council, remember. So wherever you're looking at doing an SA, for God's sake, please ring the local council and understand their policy. And I do think you should call them rather just look on the website. Like I think you need to get it from the horse's mouth, very clear, so you can ask upfront questions. What do I need to do to get this legal and compliant first time? I think, that's really, really important to just make that phone call. Again, easy to do, easy not to do, but could make the difference between you staying at home and having a good sleep in your bed or in a jail cell. So, maybe just think about that. I think just before you go wading in and having a guess. So no, it does vary per council, and so like I said, there's lots of different ways that the government and local councils are now trying to combat this. And some of it is just sheer panic because in some areas there are people complaining about over tourism. And and Scarborough's a good example of that. So I think now they're going to bring in selective licensing for SA, which is exactly what we saw before with HMOs. everything in SA is following suit to HMO. So I think one of the best things you can think about with SA is it going to become heavily regulated over time? Absolutely, yes, that is already happening. So you need to make sure that you are absolutely belt and braces from a legal and a compliant point of view. And so one way is a selective licensing, the other way is planning, definitely. We're seeing that a lot with local councils now. Some of them do require full planning permission if you want to run an SA and that's what you're planning on, that they are your intentions to do so. And equally, if you've already got a property um that's running as like a buy-to-let or HMO, you may still have to go for full planning to change it into an SA, even though that you're not actually doing anything to the property. It might just be that you're going to start renting it as an SA. Some areas are really cracking down and are wanting full planning permission. So it is absolutely vital that you do understand what your local area and probably government really want, because you don't want to get that wrong.
Well, that's been a really exciting canter through all things SA, and I've learned a lot. I hope people listening and watching have as well. I imagine they have, and yeah, I think I'll be recommending listening to this. For anyone who asks me, "Hey, do you know anything about SA?" I'd say, "Just go listen to that. That'll save me explaining stuff, because Sarah did a much better job of it than I ever could." And great to have someone, an expert in the field, talking about SA in such an exciting and concise way. So, we will, of course, as always, post your contact details with this, with the podcast, wherever you're watching and listening to this. But people are lazy, so how can they get hold of you?
That is a very good question. So you can obviously visit our website, which is www.kafproperties.co.uk. We've got a contact section on there. You can just bob us a message. It'll come straight through to my email and I will respond accordingly. More than welcome for you to pick up the phone. I'm very amenable. I'm available all hours. No, I'm not really, but I'm available most of the time, unless I'm sleeping. And that's 07702638673. Give me a call anytime, and or text WhatsApp. I'm happy with any form of communication, but if there is any questions or any way that I can help anybody, because I do know that SA is a minefield, I am of course more than happy to help.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.